The topic for this video is still going to be related to macromolecules. We're going to focus a little bit more on our carbs and nutrition in this video, because I know a number of you out there are nutrition majors. So this is kind of how this class ties into what you want to do, okay? Because the macromolecules that we're going to talk about are the same things that we need to take in for nutrition, all right? Now, in terms of our carbs and nutrition, we've got two types of carbs. We've got our simple carbohydrates, and we've got our complex carbohydrates. And this is one of those times where things are kind of named based on what it sounds like, okay? If I asked you for some examples of simple carbohydrates, something you might tell me. Things like sugar, white bread, white rice, things like that are going to be examples of simple carbohydrates. A sugar-sweetened soda would be another, okay? In terms of simple carbohydrates, typically what simple carbohydrates give you are energy and not a lot else. And in terms of those simple carbohydrates, I'm not going to stand here in front of you and tell you all simple carbohydrates are bad. They're not necessarily bad. We just need to take them in moderation, because we do get energy from them. And believe it or not, your brain actually functions better when there's more glucose available. All right, and glucose would be something that would be considered a simple sugar. Okay, so when you study and you take those sugary treats, you're really feeding your brain while you're studying. Okay, the bad part of this is it gives you energy, but there's not a lot else that goes along with it. Okay, the complex carbs are going to give you carbohydrates, but along for the ride, you've got fibers, you've got fiber, vitamins, minerals, okay? So in terms of those complex carbohydrates, you still can derive energy from complex carbohydrates, but you get the addition of the fiber and the vitamins, which are also part of your diet that you need, all right? So in terms of those complex carbs, if I asked you for examples of a complex carb, something you might tell me would be something like brown rice is a complex carb. Really, any of your whole grains. And when we're talking complex carbs, we're talking about really vegetables, fruits. Although fruits a lot of times will fall under the simple carbohydrates, some fruits you will get some fiber out of, like apples are going to be a bit more complex. But some fruits are going to be closer to a simple carb than a complex carb. I'm not worried about you classifying the difference between them right now. If you know these couple of examples for right now, that's plenty, okay? But in terms of the benefits of the complex carbohydrates, this is going to be where your dietary fiber comes in, all right? And the dietary fiber primarily is going to be something like cellulose, although if you take fiber supplements, I think the fiber associated with those a lot of times is inulin, which is a derivative of cellulose. But essentially, Our digestive tract, oops, can't break it apart. And what that does is it provides essentially something that's a food source for the bacteria that are in your gut, because the bacteria in your gut, a lot of them can break down some cellulose. So you will get a little bit broken down by the bacteria. But even still, you don't have enough bacteria to break down all of the cellulose or all of the fiber that you take in, because that cellulose is what makes up the plant cell walls, okay? So that cellulose gives structure to the plant because the plant doesn't have bones to hold it up. It's got cellulose instead, all right? But what that does, the part of the fiber that doesn't get broken down, I'm going to put this down as cleans, but it's not really cleaning. What it's doing is it kind of scrapes the inside of your digestive tract, all right? And you're less likely to have polyps form, all right? And where that becomes important is with things like colon cancer, because polyps typically are the benign tumor, meaning they aren't cancerous yet. But the polyps are what become colon cancer. So if you get rid of the polyps by eating lots of fiber and not letting them develop, that's better overall for your digestive health, okay? So in terms of that, fiber is the big part that's going to be beneficial to the complex carbohydrates. Vitamins are going to be the next part that are important, all right? And in terms of that, there's only one vitamin that we can actually make in our bodies. And that vitamin is vitamin D, all right? So essentially vitamin D, what we need in order to make vitamin D is exposure to sunlight. That sunlight hits our skin, activates chemicals within our skin, which are eventually converted to vitamin D, okay? A lot of our vitamins we have to get via diet, so we take them in, or there are some vitamins that are actually made for us by the bacteria in our gut, okay? Vitamin K is going to be one, and some of the B vitamins are also ones that tend to be made by bacteria that are present within your gut, okay? The bulk of them, we've got to get from diet though, okay? And in terms of our vitamins, we've got water soluble, and we've got fat soluble. This is where you have to be careful when you supplement your diet, because if you take in extra water soluble vitamins, essentially what you're doing is if you overload on water soluble vitamins, you're going to pee them away, okay? Your body will take the maximum it needs, and any extra is going to be removed from the system. Fat-soluble vitamins, though, can be stored in your fat. So these fat-soluble vitamins you have to be a little bit more careful of. These are the ones where you can actually take in too much because of the ability to store it in the fat. And the levels of some fat-soluble vitamins can be toxic, all right? But we do need some of it. All right, don't avoid fat-soluble vitamins for that reason. We need both the water-soluble and the fat-soluble vitamins, okay? And in terms of that, the vitamin D that I talked about that we can make, that's an example of a vitamin that's fat-soluble. Vitamin C which is found in a lot of citrus fruits, is going to be an example of a vitamin that's water soluble. Okay. So we've got fiber, we've got vitamins. I got one more color here, and we'll do minerals. All right. Minerals, again, we can't make any of these. So things like calcium is the example I like to give for minerals that we need to take in. Calcium is very important, all right? Just so you know, that sign I made there, kind of messily, should have been 2+ signs. Sometimes I put my thing through both of them, okay? Calcium is very important when you get to anatomy and physiology. Calcium regulates a lot of your physiology and is important in signaling a lot of your physiology. So that's something we need. In terms of calcium, we do have a storage place for calcium in the body. All right, our bone is where calcium is stored. All right, and if you don't get enough calcium, the implications on that long term can be things like osteoporosis. The bone starts getting softer and isn't as strong. And when the bone gets softer and isn't as strong, it's more likely to break. All right. Typically, you will, over time, lose some of the bone density associated with your bones. That's why the elderly tend to suffer frequently from bone fractures when they fall because of that, things like that, okay? So in terms of calcium, that's going to be one of the major minerals that you need to take in, all right? Hopefully this made sense. If you have any questions, please let me know.